Kids often are very good at mirroring what's going on in our life. When I have student speech therapists, I always tell them you need to learn to check your stuff at the door because kids are little emotional radars. So if you're having a bad day, they're going to make it worse. Parents have had children who have had meltdowns. You can't get them out of it. And it's just like this domino effect, especially kids who are delayed with their language development. They might not be understanding what's being said to them, or they might not have the social communication that they need. And a lot of them, I can tell you, Asha, are on devices too much. There are so many regulations, even from New South Wales government, tell you that kids under 2 shouldn't be on devices at all. The device doesn't have a conversation with you. You can't learn social skills with the device. Like we try and in our household, we noticed when we cut down the TV time, my son's behavior changed dramatically.
Welcome to the Life Rocks podcast. In this podcast, we explore how nature, science, education, and culture can benefit all children and future generations. This is a show for educators, parents, mentors, and anyone interested in making the lives of our children, families, and communities better. So sit back, take a breath, and enjoy the show. And now for your host, Cloran.
Hello, Live Rocks listeners. You are here today with myself, Asher, and the wonderful Catherine Crestani, who has worked for many years as a speech pathologist, working with children to help them and their families have better communication. She now works with different healing practices, neuro-emotional techniques, herbalism, and a range of other therapies to empower children and families to make positive changes, and believes in the connection of nature for children and families. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Why do children need nature?
I don't know about you, but we were on this, we were playing outside all the time. We grew up in a tiny cul-de-sac and we were out there with our neighbors, and the sun's going down and we're being told to come back inside. And we're like, no. Whereas having a little 7-year-old of my own, now it's like, hey, why don't you go outside? Because it's like that, there's been this weird shift where all of a sudden we're begging our children to go outside instead of, begging them to come in. And being in nature is very grounding, and it helps us just be present. And just sometimes we have to remember to just take that breath and look around us and see the beauty of what there is. TV keeps filtering all these images through, especially, to our kids. And sometimes just having that wonderment, and from running nature camps with kids, I stare at this little ant and their family on a leaf, just building this beautiful, I don't even know how they did it. They were hanging on to each other to get the sap off this leaf. And the kids just stood there for 10, 15 minutes quite happily. And they're like, take photos so we can show our parents, this is so cool. But, and it was such a simple thing, like just ants on a leaf. And it was just that beautiful wonderment and things. And if we don't encourage that in kids and let them experiment with nature, then that creativity kind of gets lost as well. And as we get older, we forget about that creativity, and it can be such a good outlet, like going outside and just taking in what's around us. So by getting kids back in nature, we're setting a good precedent for what it's going to be like in adulthood, to put that love and that stillness in there. And also, I know we've talked about grounding. So
Grounding back before the internet meant you've got to stay home because you're naughty. What is all this stuff about grounding?
Yeah. So science is catching up to grounding. So if you're into any sort of healing, you always hear people say, you need to ground, you need to ground, you need to ground. And the reason is that we as humans have this beautiful energy field around us, and it's called a biofield in science. So if we take the science and mix it together, this is the cool part. So then when we're around electronic devices, so like computers, phones, TVs, even fridges, anything that gives out an electrical pattern, that actually breaks up and disturbs what's happening in our own field. So when we go out in nature and ground, nature is built for us. We've come from nature, we interact with nature. The energy is perfect for us. So when we go out there barefoot, which sounds weird to most people, but you go out in nature barefoot, your energy will be pulled into the earth and you'll suddenly feel like everything's right in the world again, because it's discharging all those interfering energies that we've been around all day, whether it's TV, work, being on the phone, whatever it might be. That is all discharged by grounding and putting your feet on the earth. And they've even shown now that if you go into dewy earth, so even we've had a bit of rain where we are, going out onto that earth after it's just rained creates a bigger balance of electricity in the body. And when I say electricity, there's been these really cool things floating around where a person has a voltage meter and he's holding it when he's standing on the ground with shoes on and nothing happens. And as soon as he takes his shoes off and stands on the ground, the voltage meter shifts. So that as well backs up that whole biofield. So when we stand on the ground, it's like we're recharging ourselves at the same time as well.
A lot of science likes to talk about it is that the human body and the brain and the heart produce electromagnetic fields that come out of the body. Can you speak a bit more to how you ground, how you might say ground yourself as opposed to how you might help children to ground, and how you think about putting this into a practical application?
Yeah. So if you can, the easiest way is just take your shoes off and go put your feet on the grass or on any form of nature. So even we have lots of sandstone around us, and I was just standing on that barefoot, and it's the same feeling. So it's just having that bottom of our feet, because our feet have a lot of energy in it, and connecting that. It's almost like you think of when lightning strikes something, it needs to find an exit point. It's the same with our energy. So when you stand on the ground barefoot, that extra energy is finding an exit point so it can go into the ground. And that's why we were talking about that voltage reading before, because it's that loop that ends up happening. So for kids, you just tell them to go barefoot and they love it. So you can also eat food that comes from the ground. So if you have foods that are growing in the ground, like carrots, potatoes, sweet potatoes, parsnips, anything that grows in the ground, beetroot, that can give you grounding energy too, because it's like energy matching like as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment there around grounding foods. And that's a very old school naturalist approach that you might see in like Chinese medicine or Ayurveda, which is like attracts like, or like fixes like. And something that's interesting about root vegetables is that they need to produce strong antibiotics to actually survive in an underground environment where there's loads and loads of things that want to eat them, like bacteria and fungi. So they are actually really good at restoring the gut, root vegetables in particular, because they're kind of designed for that dark, deep environment, which you could say is a bit of a simile for our gut, full of bacteria, full of different fungi, and that sort of thing. So I know that you've spent many years working in a clinic setting as a speech pathologist for children, helping children develop their speech. What are some of the biggest lessons that you have learned in your time doing that about children, about development?
So I've always looked at kids as little humans, because they often are very good at mirroring what's going on in our life. And when I have student speech therapists or anyone who works with me, I always tell them you need to learn really quickly to check your stuff at the door, because kids are little emotional radars. So if you're having a bad day, they're going to make it worse. And often even I would have days where one child would have a meltdown. So a meltdown is not fun. If any parents have had children who have had meltdowns, you can't get them out of it. And then the next child would have a meltdown. And the next child would have a meltdown. It's just like this domino effect, and it makes your day incredibly long. But that's kind of how it flows through. So just thinking of that and trying to find strategies to help them regulate from that. So a lot of parents, especially kids who are delayed with their language development. So in other words, when I say language, it's like they might not be understanding what's being said to them, or they might not be able to speak or put their words together, or they might not have the social communication that they need. So they don't understand, they don't have good play skills. And a lot of them, I can tell you, Asha, are on devices too much. So
Yeah.
there are so many regulations, even from New South Wales government, like they'll tell you that kids under 2 shouldn't be on devices at all. And
Yeah.
kids,
0.
yeah, 0, correct. Big fat 0. And even when I run education things with other speech pathologists, they can't believe it's 0 either, and they're like, what? And we're like, no, it's 0. Like, there's all this research showing that it's 0. And often it's taking
Blissful
that time.
ignorance. Blissful ignorance.
Yeah. And often it's taking that time out as parents to play. And it seems such a weird thing, but as a parent, like, playing with your child is like the most engaging thing that you can do for them. And often I will say, take them to the park, or take them somewhere where they can engage with other children, or be outside, or, go for a walk together. And that's where that nature kind of comes in. And even so many kids, like, I'll take photos of kangaroos and whatever shows up on our property, because we're lucky to live near the bush. But the kids they're fascinated by it. And then that is a talking point. Like, it's
Yep.
just something so simple like that.
Yeah.
And even, yeah, I'm a big advocate for books. So, linking that in, then, hey, we went and saw these like animals today at the zoo, and then linking it into having a book about those animals. And then you can promote language and that lovely rapport that you get to read with your kids. And then you're also building up their literacy. So, there's all this cool stuff. Just by going to one thing, you can stem out all this other stuff. And you don't necessarily need devices. So, like, we try, and in our household, we noticed when we cut down the TV time, my son's behavior changed, and like, dramatically. More imagination came out, more pretend play. He asked us less to do things. He got lost in his play, which is often what we forget, is that kids actually need time to play as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and TV takes away that imagination, or being on a device takes away. And I have a lot of clients come and say, oh, but they learn how to do this from watching the device. But what the thing is, the device doesn't have a conversation with you. You can't learn
That's
social
right.
skills with the device. There's no
That's
interaction.
exactly right.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I've never had a passionate and inspiring conversation with a 5 or 6-year-old about Minecraft, because I'm just not into it. They're like, oh, blah, blah, there's these blocks and they do this. And I'm like, yeah, cool.
I have,
Cool.
honestly, and
It's where nature is something that we can all relate to. Wow, that tree's so beautiful. And mum and dad are like, yeah, it's so beautiful. Let's talk about the tree. But some of
yeah.
these things on the iPads that are going on, I mean, God, so boring.
And it amazes me, like, Minecraft has been around for so long, and I have Minecraft stickers that I give to kids for doing a good job. I am not, the only thing I know is this green little creeper, but I had to laugh the other day. I was working on the V sound with one of my clients, and we have a picture of a village. And he's like, oh, it's a Minecraft village. I'm like, hey, if that's going to get you to say it, then go for it. But,
Yeah. Totally. Running geology classes in schools, there will always be the Minecraft kids who come out and they're like, that's obsidian, that's iron ore. And it's like, great, Minecraft's taught you something.
Yeah,
That's all.
exactly. Meanwhile, I'm here going, oh, I have those crystals.
Yeah, we got the real stuff over here.
And the biggest thing I tell parents too is just to talk through things, especially because we're all here having a human experience, right? And emotions are such a big thing. And often kids will come in and they'll get really fidgety on the chair, and the parents get frustrated. And I'm like, let them fidget. Like, as long as they're doing what I need them to do, I don't care.
Yeah.
Especially their bodies need to move. And that's something I've learned a lot, because I've worked with some really amazing occupational therapists, and I've read a lot of stuff. I'm doing a lot of those courses. I was telling you before, there's a really cool book called Balance and Barefoot by Angela Hanscom. And she talks about the need to be out in nature and to let kids be barefoot to help engage their sensory pathways, which very much falls in line with what kind of goes on in the classroom. So I'll have parents come in and go, they're not concentrating. And I'm like, well, what do they normally like to do? And they're like, I love being on the trampoline and being outside. And I'm like, okay, well, you're putting them in a classroom where they have to sit down and listen. Of course, they're going to need to be doing something. That's how their body's built. They need to be moving. And obviously, it's not every kid, but you have your certain kids that need to be out there and need to be engaged. And it amazes me too, even working with younger kids, and we'll be doing stuff to build up their vocabulary, so their words, and we're doing fruit and vegetables, and they don't know what they are. It amazes me. Like, these are the things that we need to bring back to kids. And like, even where does milk come from? And they just look at me. It's like, no, it's the cow. Or where does the eggs come from? The chickens lay the eggs. So there's this mismatch, and just, life processes, and talking them through with kids, same way as talking through emotions, helps them build an understanding, even on a subconscious level. So
Totally.
Yeah.
I'm really on your same page here, and it's inspiring me to speak up a little bit about, when you said, but parents say that this thing on the app or something is teaching them language skills. I think that all of these people producing software, plus parents who want to use convenience as parenting, use ways of packaging what's happening as a reason why we should use technology. They develop language skills by using the app. It makes them more able to do the work because my child doesn't like talking to real people, that prefers talking to a robot because they feel more comfortable. How many crutches are we going to put in between a child and the real experience of life? If we wanted to teach them about vegetables and fruits, let's go for a trip down to the supermarket and walk around and talk about it. We don't need an app that tells you the names of fruits and vegetables as a proxy for the real experience that's always here. So I think the marketing on these products that are sold to parents and talking about, they benefit language skills, they benefit literacy skills, they'll help neurodivergent kids who aren't good at communicating with adults, all of this is nonsense. What do you think?
Well, the thing with that is too, like, you have to remember that there's been a lot of research showing that devices alter the pattern in our brains. So when your children are on devices, it's actually preventing the development of the frontal lobe. So, and it's actually affecting it. And that's why there's a lot of things saying that kids shouldn't play video games until they're over 13, because their frontal lobe hasn't developed enough yet to let them actually take in that what they're doing is not real. For them, their brain puts what they're doing on the screen is actually real as well. So I've had a lot of parents who, when I kind of said, they've asked me how many hours a day should they be on screens. And I say, well, they're 4, max 2, max 2. And they look at me. Anyway, some parents go try it and they go, my gosh, their behavior's better. They're playing more. They're talking more, and all of a sudden they're interacting more. It's not, and I get it. I'm a parent. I understand. Until last year, I was running a business. I was working 7 days a week. I get the nature of, hey, it's easier just to put them in front of the TV. But at the same time, I saw the behavior changes in my own child, and I couldn't do that. I can't go back to that because I know
convenience is the devil in disguise.
Yeah, exactly. And even a lot of kids, especially neurodivergent children, they're really sensitive, and it's so counterintuitive because we get taught that they're socially awkward, they don't understand. It's just they're uncomfortable because they're feeling and understand a lot more that we don't. And even when we look at how their brains differ and things like that, they have areas of their brains developed or have more energy than we actually do. So when you take that step back and go, maybe they're just having a meltdown in a shopping center because there are a lot of people and a lot of energy floating around, a lot of biofields floating around, right? That's where that kind of breakdown happens. But then to put a device in front of them to try and mask that, well, then, yeah. And don't get me wrong, I think they're great for having a break and as an alternative learning tool, because sometimes you need a different dynamic, but I don't think it should be the only learning tool. And the thing that breaks my heart is I worked in schools for a number of years, and I would go into the classroom and they'd be having fruit break, and instead of the teacher reading a story, they'd have YouTube on with the teacher on YouTube reading a story. I'm like, really? Do we really need that? Do we need that much technology? I'd walk into a prep classroom. So prep is like the year before kindergarten. And one of the free play stations is iPads. I'm like, what? This, and then kids forget how to play. Half of my job is actually teaching children how to play, which to me is a little bit heartbreaking. At the same time, it's really cool because I get paid to teach kids how to play, and I get to be my inner child and have a great fun playing with Bluey and everything. But at the same time, I'm like, this isn't right. Like these, and these are not just children who might be neurodivergent. These are also children who might just be a little bit behind and talking and things like that. And I'm there teaching them how to play. And kids learn through imitation. So if they see us on our devices all the time, they're going to want to be a device all the time. If we're not on devices all the time, then they're going to go, hey, I want to do what mum and dad are doing. And they'll join in with cooking. They'll want to help in the garden. They'll want to clean the house, and let them while they do that.
Okay, besides screens, what are parents not doing that would massively impact the health of their children?
Talking to them. I know it sounds so simple, but just having that conversation with them and talking to them like they're not so much an adult, but explaining to them what's going on, and they're little sensitive beings, like I was saying before. And often, I found if I'm feeling angry or if I'm feeling frustrated, sometimes little humans think that they've caused that. And they don't understand because they're still building their understanding of the world. So by saying to them, and it's so simple, all you have to say is, I'm really angry today. It's okay. It's okay to be angry. I'm not hurting anybody. Just part of my human experience. It's part of being human. And if you know why you're angry, you can even tell them. And then they go, oh, okay. And they go back to their world. But as a parent, often if we don't put that bridge in there, if we're really irritated, then they'll start being irritated too, because they can't separate yet that emotion out and not knowing that it's not theirs that they're feeling. So again, that's where these biofields come in, and because we're all interacting with each other. So just having that open conversation and talking is such a powerful thing. And, reading books as well is another good way that you can engage. So I found it hard to do, like boys typically, I say typically, I don't know why there's these cool things where boys will want a certain type of play and girls want another type of play, whole different. But it's you don't even try. Like I never forced anything on my son, and he gravitated all the time towards cars and trains, no matter what, He still played with dolls in my office and things like that. But, so boys generally want more rough and tumble play. I'm not saying not all girls don't, but boys
higher
do. So
testosterone levels, higher uterine, it predisposes them to movement.
That's it. So, my son got that with my husband, and I'm like, what am I meant to do? But I love books. So, I share my love for books with him. He has more books than toys, and he will happily sit there and go through them all. But it's also a conversation point for us too. And you can build critical thinking skills as well. Like, hey, why do you think they did this? Or, what do you think they could do differently to make this story change? Or getting them to think outside the box. And it can all just start with a book. And I'm not talking about novels. You can be like a simple picture book. Sometimes you can even have books without words, and it can be enough to evoke that conversation in that language. So that's another thing that I always say. So talk to your child, read some books. So yeah, and go outside.
We're definitely in need of a cultural return to some of the old school ways. We're on too many screens too often, not spending enough time outdoors. And because of all of that, we tend to not talk to each other as much. Why do you think people and parents in general find it so hard to communicate to each other about emotion?
It's like, how do I describe it? We've been brought up to tell, like, only girls cry, right? So there's that thing. Oh, stop being so emotional. All right. So we've got all these things floating around society making us feel like having emotions is a bad thing, or it's a
Mm,
girly thing, or it's like, you can't be like that. Girls can't get angry. You can't say what you're really feeling. That's
mm,
rude. So there's all these cultural things. So we've just learned to shut down and stop talking about how we're feeling. And then if you do, there's this thing where you just kind of get cut back down again. And it's almost learning that actually we're here, we're human, and part of being human is having emotions. That's what makes us who we are. That's what shapes everything in our life. Whatever emotional event happened, you could be really scared of, I don't know, it could be you're really scared of birds, and then you trace it back, and it could be when you were 2, a bird swooped at you while you're going for a walk with your parents. So these emotion reactions and even how you show up in life, you can trace them all back to things that happened in childhood, because we never got taught how to separate those emotions and work through them. So when we start to talk to them with our kids and say, hey, this is the emotion going on, or if they're having a big experience, you can say, I get it. You're feeling scared. I would feel scared too. So naming the emotion and validating it, and then giving them some way to work through it. Like, hey, how can we make you feel safer? That's something that is like 3 steps, 3 easy steps as a parent that you can do with your kids to help them build their emotional intelligence. And then later on, have that resilience that a lot of us have had to learn to rebuild, just because that was the culture. Like you said, change the culture, but that was the culture, that
mm.
we don't talk about emotions and we shut them down. So.
Yeah, I thought it was a really interesting point that you made earlier before about talking to your child about your own emotional state in a balanced way, because I think for a lot of parents who have been raised up in our culture that doesn't understand emotions very well, they might think, my child's so young, I don't want to expose them to what I'm feeling. So even if I am angry, I'm going to pretend like I'm not so that I don't influence my child. But the way that you phrased it then was fantastic, where you said, hey, look, I'm angry. This is part of the human experience. It's going to happen sometimes. It's all good. Nothing to do with you. But we'll just go about our day, or whatever it was that you said. I think that's a really good lesson that a lot of people will take on board out there.
To further that example, so a few years ago, I had to move my office and I had 2 days to do it. And so it was like the Friday we shut, we had the whole weekend, and then the Monday we had to reopen. So it was chaos trying to move. Like, you can only imagine how many toys, like in my like being a speech pathologist, yeah, like a toy shop. Some people call us
Yep.
the toy doctors. Like,
You've
so
trod on a few Lego pieces in your time.
definitely, definitely. So,
Yep.
we're like trying to get all this stuff happening. And I just sat down with my son at the start of that Saturday. I said, look, I'm going to be really, really busy this weekend. I'm going to feel stressed, and it's nothing to do with you. It's just we really have to move this whole office over to our new place, get it all set up, put all the furniture together, and have it ready to go for Monday. And he was an angel. Like, all my staff were like, how is he so good? Like, he is just so calm. And I said, because I told him what was going on. He knows I'm not ignoring him. He knows we have to get this done. And if he really needs me, he knows I'll be there for him. And it was just setting up that precedent, because I knew it was going to be hectic. And he was just so amazing. And I did buy him a present, which, just to say, hey, thank you for being an amazing human, because that's the things we want to reward, right? Rewarding like that. Hey, thank you for giving me that emotional space. And thank you for
Mm.
allowing me to be in that space and not thinking that it was you as well. So, and we did buy him Lego, funnily enough, but so to get him building. But it's such a simple thing. And often sometimes it teaches you lessons too, that you can catch yourself in different moods. So the other morning I said, I'm in a really bad mood. I don't know why. I'm just trying to shift it. Just give me some space. And then he goes, can I have some toast? And I'm like, and he goes, oh, that's right. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. So, and it's just, it is how it is. And you've got to understand too that they have days like that as well. So it's about helping them through those days. And, sometimes when they're having a tantrum, you can have a tantrum too. And it helps them go, oh, you get it. So years ago there was that ad where the child was throwing a tantrum on the floor, and then the parent got down and threw a tantrum on the floor as well, and the child stopped because they didn't know what to do. I have to be honest, that inspired me. I did that a few times and the kids just stop straight away. They don't even know what to do. This adult's having a meltdown. What is going on? And it's almost like they get shocked back out and they go, okay, it doesn't matter anymore. Let's move on. So it doesn't work all the time, but when it does, it's like it's a bit fun.
You gotta flip the script sometime, mix it up.
That's it.
What other tips have you learned in your time as a mother working with children that you think could influence a peaceful, a calm, a happy family?
Well, I was going to say, I always have more patience for other people's children than my own, but that's okay. That's my little adventure. But I guess it's being, how can I explain that? So it's like, when something happens, it's about talking it out rather than just shutting it down and swiping it to the side. But it's almost bringing that back, that whole idea of having a family meeting or having a discussion together rather than just, you did that was wrong, or that wasn't appropriate. And also not being afraid to say no. Not being afraid to say no to your kids. And I know a lot of people will say, oh, but you got to hold back no for like really dangerous things. It's like, yeah, okay, I agree with that. But at the same time, you can't give them everything, because then they just think anything they ask you, they'll get. And then when you have to say no because you might not have the money that week, or you might not have time to do it, then you won't get the meltdown. And we often, there's been this weird shift where we feel we need to, I've had parents ask their kids if they want to come to therapy or not that day. And I'm like, what? Like, be the parent. You have to be the parent. These little humans don't know yet the rule, like not rules, but don't know the flows of life and don't know, hey, sometimes we have to do things in order to gain a goal. And if we don't instill that in them younger, what's their drive later in life? Like, why are they going to persevere with something if they don't have a reason to keep working towards it? So in terms of keeping calm, we use so many things. And I have to be honest, one of the biggest things that we did was take sugar out of our son's life. So he was actually incredibly violent on sugar. He would throw things through walls. He would punch us in the face. Like, people don't believe it meeting him now. So we took sugar out, replaced it with other things. I don't think he misses out. You can be very creative. If he still has a birthday cake, we just swap it out for maple syrup or a natural or honey or something like that. And sometimes sugar can be a lot of behavioral issues too. So that's something always to look. And there's a lot of hidden sugars and things. We do use a lot of like calming oils. So, like lavender and peppermint and just things like that can help bring the calm thing. And even giving him a massage as he's going to bed. And I have a few clients that have started doing that with their kids. Like, they get a bit of lavender oil, maybe a bit of coconut oil, and they massage their kids' feet and their legs. And it's just that connection. It's that heart connection, body to soul. And then also it helps calm them before they go to sleep. And then they have this beautiful memory of, hey, mum or dad just gave me this lovely massage before I went to sleep. And it helps, especially after bath time. It's very calming and it helps them settle down a lot quicker too. So
totally. The lavender oil was something my mum did when I was young. And whenever I smell it now, it's a trigger for like
go to sleep.
Sleepy bedtime. Yeah. It's Totally.
Now, for those of you who don't know, Life Rocks is not just a podcast. It is an education foundation centered around connecting children to the magic of nature through earth sciences. As a self-funded foundation and startup, we are constantly seeking support so that we can continue our great work. So if you feel called to donate to Life Rocks, please head down to the show notes and find the relevant donation link. We accept regular money as well as cryptocurrencies. We greatly appreciate you, our Life Rocks community. Now, back to the show.
So, behavioral issues, ADD, autism, attention deficit disorders, behavioral stuff in the classroom, childhood anxiety, all of these things have been on a rise. Some people will say, well, it's due to reporting and we have better methods for analyzing it now, and that's why we're picking more of it up. And other people will say, well, in a world that's got increasingly more plastic, more screens, more media, less outdoor time, heaps more sugar in everything, no wonder all of this stuff is on the rise. How much is behavioral issues just caused by lifestyle factors?
I really couldn't tell you, but just from autism. So when I started working as a new graduate speech therapist, I think I had one child with autism on my caseload. And I'm not talking about possibly others could be diagnosed or couldn't be diagnosed. After 3 years, I had 60 kids a week who were on the spectrum. So, and the statistics when I started were 1 in 1,000. Now they're predicting that it'll be 1 in 20 by 2030. So that alone to me is staggering, but we won't go down that rabbit hole because there's so many things that could be triggering that. But, the behavioral things, the things I always say to parents first, have you tried taking the sugar out? Because often we don't realize how much the sugar actually has this effect on the brain. And even there's been studies with children, especially on the spectrum, with when they look at gluten can have an opiate effect on the brain for children who are on the spectrum. And often I end up on the bland and tan diet. That's what I call it. So, rice, plain pasta, bread, so I call it the bland and tan diet. But, and that just keeps feeding that opiate effect. And then they become really fussy eaters because so then they just think I'm only going to get the energy here. And it's the same with sugar. So if you keep having high sugar foods, you just want more high sugar foods because your insulin peaks and then it drops too quickly because sugar foods don't keep the insulin up. And then if the insulin's working too hard, then your body holds onto fat because it's not actually kicking in to let the fat go. And then all of a sudden you have all these other issues as well. So, when parents come into me and they go, they can't pay attention, they're really violent. And I'm like, okay, how about we try taking them off sugar? So, I've had clients come in and tell me, I figured out what triggers her meltdowns. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, she had a chocolate frog. Like, I won't say the brand, but she has a specific chocolate frog. And they were just driving home. She was really calm, like her daughter in a really good mood. And they'd gone grocery shopping and she got into the bag and opened it. And she said it was like a gremlin came out. Like she took her seatbelt off. She was trying to grab mom. She was driving and she's like, what happened? She turned around, she saw the wrapper and she went, oh my goodness. So, it's like these incidents and these examples, but a lot of people don't have a look at that. Often I used to run transition to kinder groups and we'd have the kids bring their lunch boxes so we could practice, opening their food and make sure they could actually open their lunch box. And they'd open their lunch box and the occupational therapist and I would have a heart attack because there was more sugar in their lunch box for that one day than we would consume in a month. And we were just like, what? Like mind blowing. So then when, I hear that, oh no, they've been put on medication for, ADHD.
ADD. Yep.
Yeah. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Really? And I can tell, like, having done this job for so long, I know which kids are. I call them the tickers. So when I explain like ADHD, ADD, I use Winnie the Pooh as an analogy, right? So we've got Winnie the Pooh in the middle, who's how we want to be, can be
Yep.
happy, can be fast. Tigger is our ADHD, bouncing off the walls everywhere you
Yep.
need to go, a million miles a minute. And then Eeyore's your, so I know which kids come in my room and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got a Tigger. Versus the kids that just need to move and are busy. But the kids
Yeah.
that just need to move and busy are the ones often getting labeled as ADHD. And if you
Yeah.
read that Balance and Barefoot book, it's because they're not getting enough playtime, because
Yeah.
a lot of the research shows that children have to have a solid hour of play. That's right, 1 hour straight before they're actually fully engaged and interacting in their imagination. Then recess and lunch times are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And I'm like, when are they meant to play in their
Yeah.
6-hour day? Yeah.
I think in the West it's bad, right? We know that there's way too much screen time. Resource and lunch are getting shorter. When I was in Canada, I spoke to the Human and Nature Youth Club, who was a University of British Columbia run initiative to get children off mainland China. A, because it's a heavily polluted place where there's not a lot of access to nature in incredibly dense urban environments. The second point being is their culture of schooling is so intense that there's literally no play in their curriculum. It's maths, language, science from the get-go, from woe to go for children. And it's intense, and it crushes the imagination. It crushes free will. It crushes all sorts of health outcomes. And it's really, really terrible. I think basically when we're talking about these children who are getting medicated because of a lack of play or even too much sugar in the diet, we have to remind people here that the human body runs off fats, carbs, and proteins.
Mm-hmm.
And our cells, like the cells of our literal organs, our literal glands, our literal hormones, are not built off sugar. They're built off protein. So if you want to stabilize your child's blood sugar, which is what runs their stress hormones, which is what runs their behavior, you've got to give them some quality protein. And a lunchbox that has just fruit and grains and rice crackers and what you called it, the brown and what was the
Bland and tanned.
bland and tanned. Like, I've seen so many kids that have a lot of emotional issues going on. They just want to eat potato chips, apple slices, maybe cheese if you're lucky, and rice crackers or something like that. And it's like, how would you raise a child on that? Like, do we understand that a body's made of these fundamental components? Unless you're putting in the fundamental components, you're not going to get out any sort of result.
Yeah, and it's almost like then that addiction, because their system just gets in that addiction of the sugar.
The
and
palate's trained to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even we watched just a few days ago on that Sugar movie, which is a documentary,
Okay.
and he doesn't change how many calories he has a day. So he was on a high protein fats diet, like really good, like had lots of avocado, like really good fats and things like that. And
Sure.
he swapped to what would be deemed a healthy low-fat diet. But he was consuming 40 teaspoons of sugar a day, which is the equivalent in most Australians, which is really scary.
The healthy low-fat diet is a marketing scheme from big pharma, big agriculture. It's all crap.
Yeah.
There you go.
And so even though he had the same amount of calories like every day and was doing the same amount of exercise, he put on like all this weight, especially around his belly. He had like all these tests done. He ended up with fatty liver, like all this stuff. And all he did was change to having the sugar. And his doctor couldn't believe it. Like his doctor actually apologized at the end for recommending that to people. Like, because she could not believe that is what happened. If it hadn't happened, like, he did it for 60 days, and by the end of the last day, he actually had a typical kid's lunchbox, and it had 40 teaspoons of sugar in it. So
Holy moly, 40
yeah.
teaspoons of sugar.
Yeah. And it's even, he's like, it's all like, even like he was saying, like some cereal, like they say, oh, per serve. He goes, but then you put the per serve because, and it's like half a cup. And he goes, hang on, I'm a grown. He
No
goes,
one's
I'm
gonna
a
eat
grown
that.
boy. Yeah, exactly. He goes, I'm
Yeah.
going to take two of those. Thanks you very much. So it's a really cool documentary. Not that I have any affiliates with it, but we actually watched it with our son, and he went, whoa, like, just to open him up as to why we talk about sugar and things like that. And,
Yeah.
get different education point of view. So, but yeah, we could go down the sugar thing. But, and I guess often too, teaching kids where their food comes from, a lot of kids become more engaged with food when you teach them how to grow it as well. So
Yep.
I know, for us, like, my son wants to run and go check if the carrots have grown, or have the peas, are the peas ready? Our peas don't even make it inside. They just get off the vine and get, he'll happily go pick all the tomatoes. And it's just that engaging in nature, even through gardening and growing your own food and watching that process and having that reward. That is another way, that kids can learn about where their food comes from, learn how to create food. It is essentially creating your own food just from seeds, which is pretty cool, and then often have that exposure, and even including them in cooking can help expand what they eat. So, I have to admit, sometimes my son can be the bland and tan diet, and we're like, no, we like go, no, you have to have a carrot, we have to have some egg, we have to,
Right.
we have to bring something else in too.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay. But, so like, even we make homemade pizzas, and he's like, oh, can I go grab some spinach from the garden and put some spinach on it? We're like, yes. We're like, I don't know where this came from, probably from watching us. And we're like, yeah. So all of a sudden,
Great.
his pizza has greens on it. And that's just from making it at home and doing it together. And that's our family activity. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. My mum always cooked everything from scratch and tried to get the healthy things and keep us away from just eating sugary stuff all the time. And yeah, definitely cultivated a sense and a love for food. Like, some of my best memories hanging out with mum have been in the kitchen, learning how to cook different things. And then my dad, he was a great gardener, and he always loved tinkering away in the garden. So walking the walk, if you've got parents that walk the walk, that's always going to go so much further than all of the, hey, do this and do that and do this. But mum and dad aren't doing it, so why should I?
Yeah. And also life skills, right? Teaching them life skills. How, as a parent, for me, like, my husband and I frequently talk about this, and we say, at the end of it, as long as he can read and write and do maths and knows how to grow his own food and cook for himself, he'll be right. If we can throw in knows how to make clothes, he'd be so sorted. But, maybe build a shelter. But in terms of those life skills, that's what we kind of put that value on, rather than that academic achievement, which has been drilled into us for so long. And like what you were saying before, that pressure from those kids on mainland China, the amount of kids having anxiety now at like year 2, year 3, year 4, it's insane. Like, I have clients come in and massive anxiety. I'm like, why? And even the long-term studies have showed, if you just reward children for trying and making the effort, they have better outcomes in life and persevering than just praising them when they get a good mark. So yeah, and that is such a big study that's coming out, and they've even shown, like, these kids, they gave one nothing, gave one praise only if they got it right, and gave one praise for doing it. And then the child that got praised for just trying and doing it ended up being able to do all these kind of puzzles, versus the one that only got praised for getting it right. And the one that got praised for getting it right actually ended up like just quitting, essentially. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Intuition,
Yes.
gut feelings, instincts. how do we install these in children? I know this is something that you find important in your work. What
Yeah.
is the intuition? How is it connected to the gut? And why is it important for us to have this conversation with our children in our life?
So again, this is like a cultural thing where we kind of get, oh no, there's no such thing as gut feelings. Like you can't follow your gut instincts. But there's a reason why those terms are around, because that is essentially where your instincts come from, your gut. And there's all these studies coming out, which is really cool, showing that the gut, the brain, and the heart all have the same cells around them, so that they all kind of have this play. And in fact, there's a lot more in the gut and the heart. So we think the brain makes all the decisions, but a lot of it comes from our heart and from our gut. So when we're thinking about instincts, often we've lost touch with those feelings because we've just kind of dismissed them. And then we ended up in situations that we go, how did I even get here? I'm totally unhappy. I'm, in this maybe a job, a 9 to 5 job, and I don't even know how I got here, and I'm miserable, but I feel something's not right. Oh, but I can't say that. And it's about almost becoming reacquainted with your soul. And if we can teach kids that at an early age, like often I'll say to kids, what feels right to you? And they get it. And it's because they haven't had that conditioning yet. What feels right? Do you think that would feel good doing that? Would that not feel very good? And even when they're hanging out with other kids and they might not be doing something they like, you can go, okay, well, when you hang around with that person, you don't even tell them you don't tell them what to do, because if you have a stubborn kid, they're just not going to do it anyway. But you just give them that comparison. You said that you felt that person made you sad when they said this to you. But when you were with this person, you felt really happy and you were having a really good time. Who would you like to spend your time with more? And it's that honoring that feeling and then bringing back that instincts. That's how you can start teaching kids intuition from a younger age. So there's like really cool techniques like linked to kinesiology called muscle testing, energy testing. It's got so many names. And it's like using your own body to test whether or not you want to do something. And I'm not talking about like a highly charged thing like, hey, should I sell my house? I'm just going to ask my body that. It's like things like, should I wear the blue shirt or the red shirt? And this is a way that as adults, we can retrain our intuition. So, which is really cool. But I might even share with you just like a little video I made on it. So then that way, if anybody listening to this wants to know more about it, they can investigate it and play with it for themselves. Because often when I tell people, they go, no, I have people argue with me. It can't be that simple. Right. So,
well, I guess it's almost like interesting because you said not like a high ticket item, like are you going to sell your house, but a lower ticket item, like what color shirt do I wear? It's almost like the mind's going to be less attached to that outcome.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure there's quite a lot of research of like how color just impacts the human organism, literally, because our sight impacts our hormonal system, and then that like what we're experiencing through our senses informs our hormonal system to produce what it is that we're feeling. So, and marketers and anyone in design, they know that colors have an impact on the way we feel. So surely there is this thing that's working inside of us that wants us to adjust and to interact with the world.
Yeah. And even like I use it when I go to restaurants and you have a menu and you don't know what to order. And sometimes I order the most random thing, but then when I eat it, my body's like, thank you. And I thought, I would have never ordered that. But clearly my body knew it wanted it.
Like it's tasty.
Yeah. But when we choose things that are non-emotive and like, what we wear or what we eat or, even like jewelry, or it can be, should I turn left today or right today? If it's like somewhere you can go 2 different ways.
On a bushwalk or something.
Yeah, exactly. It's learning to trust your intuition again to the point that you don't even need to test it anymore. You can just feel it, or you can just tapping into other senses. It's just, you just know. You're like, oh no, I'm going to wear that today because I feel like I'll need that. And weirdly, something will happen. You go, oh, thank goodness I was wearing this today. And you look down and you go, oh, like, oh, my soul kind of knew, or like my instincts knew, so
Yeah.
I like to say to people, you're never too young or old to be reacquainted with your soul, because we often lose our way with life and everything like that. But when you come back to what's right for you, you can't really do wrong, because you're going to be honoring yourself first and foremost. And if you can do that for yourself, then that's the best lesson you can teach your kids.
And isn't it so true that for every child that we see or we know or we interact with, none of us know what that person's story is going to be.
No.
None of us know what that journey is going to be like. We can only hope to fill their cup with enough energy, with enough confidence, with enough faith in themselves that they can get themselves through the hard times, and that there is love in the world, and that there's people out there who genuinely care about how they feel and letting them take charge of that. I think that's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah. And love, like, telling your kids you love them. My son gets over it, but at the same time, we've come through generations where they don't really share that with us. So it's almost like we're trying to flip it and go, no, we've got all the love for you. Let's fill up your love tank and cuddle you until you're full of love,
Yeah.
and things like that, that it's just that shift. And I'm not saying that our parents didn't do it right or could have done it differently, or their parents. It is what it is. And it's just our choice whether we want to change it or not. And break.
Unless each generation builds on the lessons of the last, what are we all doing?
That's it.
Catherine, what is your greatest wish for the future generations?
Oh, that's a tricky one. If everyone could let go of their trauma, imagine what life we would live. That'd be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Rewriting the stories.
Exactly.
Catherine, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. If people want to find you, they can head to willowhealing.substack.com, also willowhealing.org, and see what programs, see what offerings you have. You connect children to nature. Very awesome conversation to have with you today.
Thank you.
All right, listeners, make sure you're liking and subscribing and sharing all of our content with anyone out there who might have children in your life. It does help our show grow. And that's what we need to do to make the impact that we want to on all of the future generations, children and families out there, because, hey, that's the future of planet Earth. Thanks for listening. Thanks to Catherine, and thanks to all of you. Life rocks.
Thank you so much for listening to the Life Rocks podcast. If you enjoyed the show, then leave us a review. We'll be back soon with more inspiring content, and in the meantime, remember, life rocks.